I learned of the trademark dispute. I personally decided to go against that because I thought the trademark dispute, most of you must have heard about Ethiopia's initiative to register its most known coffee names as a trademark. Ethiopia believes, Ethiopia and its advisors believe that that is the way to go as a means of economic development. And we learned the corporations, actually a group of corporations, opposed to that, and I was shocked to learn that one of the corporations was one of ours here. So because that was unjust, because that was unfair, I went against this mission statement that we had. After that, I have been following this trademark dispute through the blog, poorfarmer.blogspot.com. And generally, I think, after the dust settled, I think two important points came out of that dispute, and both have an implication to the fair trade movement at a larger scale. One of them is the power imbalance. This dispute has clearly demonstrated and shown and revealed the power of the imbalance, the gross imbalance of power that exists in the coffee trade. These the poor nations, their governments and the corporations were fighting. The poorest country in the world confronting the superpower, basically. The fundamental question, for me at least, was why should a company, any company, have a say on how one country or the other treats its intellectual property, for instance? Because the debate then was that a corporation thought that was a bad idea, so they were against that initiative. I think that the basic point here is, if governments, these in poor countries, in developing nations, faced such intimidation by a corporation, imagine what will happen to the poor individual farmers, dealing with their businesses with the corporations. The other important point that came out of this is, I think, it revealed the vacuum of information that exists in the fair trade, and also the confusion that it created with corporate social responsibility, for instance. The campaign was spearheaded by Hobson, and the catchphrase, if I read it, the catchphrase read, for every cup of Ethiopian coffee Starbucks sells, Ethiopian farmers earn 3 cents. That was a huge and powerful statement, which I think is very well suited to the fair trade movement that the trademark dispute itself, because it was too wide. Because the public then assumed a resolution will be a narrower gap. The gap between 3 cents and $3 is too wide. So if this dispute is resolved, this gap was supposed to be narrow, but it didn't happen. To defend itself, Starbucks was saying that they pay like $1.46 per pound, and it's not as stated here. So I think the question here is, well, okay, the agreement was signed between Ethiopia and Starbucks. Does it mean that that gap has been narrowed enough? But it did. This brings to the question for fair trade then, okay, if these companies that are selling 4% fair trade certified coffee are treated as now corporate socially responsible companies, but what about the others who are selling 100% fair trade certified coffee? And I think this is the area that I think is a challenge for the coffee, the fair trade movement in general. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Lupe Gamboa. I currently work with Oxfam and in the worker rights domestic program. They have their worker rights division a little bit about some work that I did here trying to promote a fair trade initiative with farm workers in Washington State when I used to work, when I used to be head of the Pacific Northwest unit of farm workers. And my interest also comes from the fact that I grew up in a farm worker family and did farm work when I was growing up, in Washington state is about the third largest agriculture state in the country in terms of workers, close to 200,000. Just for example, in the apple industry, the biggest crop in the state of Washington, there's 40,000 workers hired just to harvest the crop, with many other thousand workers hired in the packing and processing. And it always struck me, that in all of the talk about fair trade and bad working conditions and exploitation, that we never focused in this country what was happening in our own backyard, state. And just some facts. Farm workers are earn well below minimum wage, living wage, poverty wages, probably about $7,500 a year, with no benefits whatsoever. And conditions have ironically gotten worse, than the time when I was a child, not to the point that, we used to have a truck that we used to get in and migrate around the country. Now, coyotes, provide that function because workers can't afford their own cars, transportation. We used to live on the farmer's property. Now, workers' houses, now workers have to live packed. Farmers don't provide housing anymore. Workers have to live packed like sardines, 10 to 15 to a single white trailer. So the cost of production has been slowly shifted to the worker as farms get larger, and you have industrial ag, and you have, at the same time, you have consolidation in the retail sector, to the tune that now 5 of the largest retailers control well over 50% of this grocery industry in the country. So what's happening across the world, first kind of started in this country, with globalization and the corporations, kind of taking control. And as a grower, gets squeezed and more is required from them, the only way that they can go is downwards, because everything else above the supply chain is, pretty well fixed. So workers are more and more squeezed every year. So, and it was very interesting. What got me thinking about fair trade is, people mentioned the WTO. At that time, I was working with the UFW, and I remember bringing 2 busloads of farm workers, from Central Washington to the gigantic demonstration that we had here. And what got me thinking about fair trade is the fact that, we were a pretty militant organization. We used to have strikes all over the place because conditions were so bad. And then after a while, I realized that we were going after the wrong target, because growers also started demonstrating. I remember this incident in Wenatchee where they dumped a grower group. Growers did a tractor caravan through Wenatchee, and then it ended up in Safeway, where they dumped a pile of apples at the parking lot, to demonstrate the fact that they were not meeting the cost of production, and they were passing out leaflets that said that for every food dollar spent at the supermarket for an apple, the growers got 8 cents, and from there they had to pay, in addition to the cost of production, they had to pay the worker. So really the culprit was not so much at the grower, they were a victim as well as the workers, but the top end of the supply chain. And so we started talking about fair trade, but to have fair trade, you got to have producers, and it was kind of a problem for us, because up to now we had been striking producers and putting pressure on them, and you also had workers. You had to get them working together, and that was a big challenge. I remember the first time that